Let's talk a little Lions. Fox 2 Sports Director, voice of the Lions, the great Dan Miller. Dan, how you doing, my friend?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good, Dan. Thanks for coming on.
Dan, what goes on during OTAs in a week like this? I mean, what is it? Being acclimated, a lot of the young guys, a lot of the rookies, they signed Jack Campbell. What's happening this week at OTAs?
I think, number one, you're trying to make sure the young guys are in the playbook, because what you want to do is you want to be able to hit the ground running when you get to camp in late July, early August. So for the guys that are just coming in particular, those early draft picks, and they're expecting to play, in particular those top three guys between Gibbs, Campbell, and Laporta, you want to make sure that they're ready to go, that there's not a huge acclimation period. You're down to 3 preseason games now, and we've seen that guys don't play a whole lot, so we'll have to see how they work the rookies in there. But that's number one. And number two, I think, look, you got some guys that are coming off injuries. You want to see where they're at. And then it's just reps. It's making sure that everybody's on the same page. Things change from year to year. Positions change from year to year. They're going to have a new secondary from last year to this year. Cohesiveness with the offensive line, just repping drills and things like that. So I think, you're laying a foundation for what you're going to do later this summer, so that the stuff you're doing now, you don't have to kind of redo that come later, and you can just be ready to roll.
And part of that foundation is the culture they've built here over the last 2 years. We use that word a lot, culture. But, I mean, when you look around, there are holdouts everywhere. But here, in a voluntary portion, you've got full participation. I mean, everybody wants to be there. Everybody wants to be with this team and being at that facility.
I think they've tried to bring in a certain type of guy. And when you talk about culture, let's face it, a lot of times culture is about winning and things like that. But I think they've also gone after a certain mindset, a certain football player. They talk a lot about loving the game, and they talk a lot about guys that it is important to them. And I think sometimes that shows up in just being there, being present, saying, okay, yeah, it is voluntary for part of this, but I'm going to be there even for the voluntary part, because it's important to me, it's important to the organization, it's important to my teammates, and I feel that I owe that to them. So I think all those things go into that big word that we throw around a lot, culture. But culture is set by the type of guys that you have. Ultimately, winning has to be a part of it. But really at its base, I think it's that locker room, how these coaches interact with that locker room, and how there's collaboration, there's unification, that everybody's kind of working towards the same goal, and you don't have guys that are kind of straying to the crazy again.
Hey, Dan, should we be worried about Frank Ragnow going forward? What toe is it? And he said it can't be worked on anymore, and the guy's playing through pain. We know that, and this is a tough game, especially at center. What's the scoop with Frank?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I've seen what you've seen. We've seen him play with pain. He said it's beyond the point now that they can operate on it. And look, a toe is not something that you necessarily want to have to deal with if you're an offensive lineman, because you're constantly pushing forward, and it's your feet that you're kind of lunging forward. In particular, in run blocking, pass blocking, it's a little more absorbing contact, but not a good thing for any sort of offensive lineman. That said, I don't know how serious it is at this point, how much he's recovered at this point. He's said they've done as much medically as they can do. He did play for the most part last year, but what you have to hope is that he's not playing in pain this year to the point that he is last year, and that this isn't something that follows him for the rest of his career, that it can get to a point where even if it's not 100%, you're not dealing with that pain issue week in and week out, because you're talking about one of the best centers in the league and really the guy that anchors that offensive line.
Talking to Dan Miller, voice of the Lions, Fox 2 Sports Director. Dan, I wanted to ask you about Jameson Williams. It looks like, many eyes are going to be on him during OTAs. It looks like he's doing all the right things right now. Calvin Johnson was at Fox 2 earlier today, talked to him, and he said, look, there's two ways you can go with this. You can go right or go left, when you face adversity, and that's what Jameson's got to figure out.
I think, and I've said this before, that Jameson's story will go by how he reacts to this 6-game penalty. Okay? Is he doing all the things that you have to do between now and final cutdown when he can be with this team to make himself a better player, to get ready to play in the National Football League? Or is he giving less than that? Because anything less than his best is not going to bode well for his future. And that means being present, knowing where your feet are, doing everything that you're supposed to do, being in that playbook, getting yourself in position so that when those 6 games are gone, you're ready to roll in game number 7. And there's a maturity involved here, and it's got to be, okay, I messed up. There's nothing I can do going backwards. All I can do is go forwards, and I'm going to go forward with the best possible attitude and ability that I can. And I think that's going to tell the story for Jameson Williams. I really believe how he reacts to this will dictate where he goes from here.
And speaking of Calvin, it is awesome to see him back with the first-round picks. It is awesome to know he's having his camp at Allen Park. I mean, fans want to see that. The Lions want that. He wants that. Just your take on the whole situation and the fact that he seems like, he said today, the relationship is on the incline. It is getting better. I think that's something everybody wants to see, don't you?
Yeah, we've seen that Mike Disner has done a lot towards trying to bridge the gap between Calvin and the team. And it's apparent when you see the things that you've talked about, Ryan, that he's standing there with Barry Sanders and the 2 number 1 picks, that he is in fact having his camp at Allen Park the day before his charity golf tournament coming up in June. Those are signs that, okay, Calvin's coming back into the family.
But yeah, I think everybody wants to see Calvin Johnson back with this organization. It is a scenario in which Calvin Johnson, Barry Sanders, 2 of the greatest Lions of all time, you want them in the fold. You want them around your current players. Every player that is on your team right now wants to be them. They want to be in the Hall of Fame. They want to be great players. They want to make impact. They want to be icons. They want to be elite. They want to be remembered in this town. And they want to see Calvin Johnson around. And, what Dan said about Jameson Williams as well. JB, how are we looking? Are we okay or no? No, not yet. Okay. They want to see Jameson Williams and how he reacts. Look, you can go down any road you want.
Yeah.
If you hit a fork in the road, you got 2 choices.
Right.
And there's only 2 real choices that you can have. You can use it as fuel to get better and go on the right path, or you can use it to say, woe is me, the rules suck, and go south. There's no other 2 options about it. There's not a third option.
Having Calvin there to coach him and to be a mentor is huge. And I really do believe that the kid, Jameson Williams, will buy in to the new Lions way, the Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes way, and just be a positive influence and not be a negative, a guy that's going to pull the team down. That's the reason they let DeAndre Swift go. They did not want to have DeAndre Swift in the room being upset that he's not getting playing time and, whine. So they sent him to Philadelphia. I don't like the trade. I never did. But that's why they do it. You get rid of malcontents and move on.
All right, speaking of moving on, we got Dan Miller back. Dan, thanks so much. I don't know if you wanted to finish a thought about Calvin and, seeing him with Barry and being in the organization.
Yeah, I don't know where it cut me off here. Technology, great. But no, I think that, as I was saying, Calvin is an all-time great in Detroit. Calvin lives in Detroit. Calvin has a business here in Detroit. So we need him to be a part of this organization. And anything less than him being a part of the family would be a terrible shame. And it appears that they have bridged much of the gap. I don't know what the specifics are, but when I see Calvin with Barry in the number 1 picks and I see Calvin having his camp at Allen Park, that tells me that, he feels comfortable being back out there. And I think that's massively important because he should be at Ford Field. He should be part of the family, and he should be a face of this organization.
Absolutely. Dan, we have a guest in studio wants to ask you a question.
Dapper, what's up, bud? So I hear you guys talking, and Calvin, a great man as we know. I've known his wife for a long time, being a part of the Lions. And, these young guys come in, they play. Barry Sanders there, he can't change DeAndre Swift. It's good to have Calvin back around the team just because he deserves it. But I'm not sure that an ex-player makes a new player turn who they are or how they were raised or how they act. But it is glad to have him back in the building. I want to ask you a question more about the defensive side of the ball, especially the D-line and our linebackers. Both very young groups, unproven, but a lot of hopefully upside. Tell me how you think we're going to get after the quarterback and stop the run this year. We went after and brought in a lot of free agents as DBs, but how do you feel our D-line and linebackers are going to be able to hold up this year to make the Lions a playoff contender and a 10-11 win team?
And let me say one thing about your initial point, Chad, and that's this. If you're a young player that is willing to listen to guys that have done it at the high level in this league, that only bodes well for you. You're right, you can't make them, but if you understand that you can listen to a Calvin Johnson, or you can listen to a Barry Sanders, or you can listen to a Herman Moore, or somebody that's done it at a high level and can help you understand what it takes to be successful in this league, that's only a positive for you. And if you don't want to do that, well, that's on you, because you've got a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge there that these guys can impart to you on what it takes and kind of sacrifices you have to make to be great in this league. So you're right, you can't make them, but I think if the smart ones will look up and say, help me, teach me, let me learn some things. I know I've got the ability, but there's intangibles in this league that can play a big part in that. Look, I think if you look at this defensive line right now, there's some questions, in particular with some guys that were injured last year. Is Onwuzurike going to make any sort of impact at all? Will he be able to play this year? Haskell was hurt for a lot of last year. He's a second-round draft pick. They think he can be an interior guy that can help him. Malik McNeil has done a lot of work this offseason changing his body. He's going to look like a different guy out there. How does that impact his performance? I think the middle of the defensive line is the biggest question that this team has. The couple of guys back on the edge, we saw what Houston did. We saw what Aiden did. Those guys have to continue to grow. Last year is the base. Last year is, I'm a rookie, I'm pretty good. Now you need to get better, and I think that's what those guys will do. And Aiden is a tireless worker that I have no doubt will try to maximize every single thing he can do. Linebackers, look, I think when all is said and done, you're looking at Anzalone and Campbell playing most of the snaps for this football team. I think Campbell's going to come in. I think he's going to start. You don't draft a kid in the first round unless you believe he's going to be a starter right away. I think that kind of kicks down Rodriguez into being a special teams type of guy. But, Chad, to your point, how those guys play will dictate where that defense goes. This defense last year wasn't good for much of the season. A lot better towards the end of the season. But you got to come out, if you want to win this division, playing that way at the beginning of the year. You got to be better against the run. And better against the run starts with those guys in the middle, flows to the linebackers, and the guys on the outside keeping every. Look, I think he's there. I think we saw how well they played at the end of last year, but I think there's still a lot of some of these guys be, how quick Jack Campbell will come along. Those possibilities are both exciting, but I think they also are question marks until guys answer them.
If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening audio only, that is our owner, Chad Johnson, sitting in the Maz chair today.
How you like that chair?
Yeah, whatever chair he wants to sit in.
That's right. He owns them all. No doubt. Hey, Dan, I wanted to ask you two major things that happened this week. Thursday Night Football flex and the fair catch on the kickoffs. How do you feel about that? Fair catch between the 25-yard line and the goal line will now be the ball goes to the 25-yard line, and then a flex. I don't know if I think you're done. I think it's frozen again. I want to thank Dan Miller for that. Let's thank Dan.
Ask Chad what he thinks then.
Yeah, I'm going to do that next. Dan, appreciate you, buddy. Love you. Chad, flex schedule. 2 Thursday night games, week 13 through week 17. So that's 5 games that could be flexed out, a maximum of 2 Thursday night games that people can have. Where are you on the flex? The Lions were one of the 8 teams that voted against flexing on a Thursday night schedule. And then what do you think of the fair catch? Jay Feely said, former kicker, said, we'll never see another Devin Hester again. That player is taken out of the league with this rule change.
I think you've seen Sheila also vote against doing the fair catch. So the Lions were against both changes that they ended up making. In regards to, special teams, I don't think there's a head coach, a GM, or a special teams coach that wants somebody to, at the 10-yard line, to raise their hand and say fair catch. I think the athletes are going to have a very difficult time catching the ball at the 5 or 10 and saying a fair catch to take it to the 25. I felt like if they wanted to say a fair catch, that it should have never been past the 20. But we're not making the decisions. I think the NFL does everything they can to stay away from litigation, I guess, which most businesses do. And I can't say that they're always trying to protect the athlete, because if they were, then you wouldn't have these Thursday night games coming off a Sunday game, given a 4-day rest, still barely even being able to get out of the bed, especially as a vet. We've talked to Calvin, we've talked to Herman, we've talked to a lot of ex-players, and it's not even until Tuesday, Wednesday to where they're able to even get out of the bed sometimes like a normal person. So they've been complaining. Every player's been complaining in regards to going from a Sunday to a Thursday game. So as much as I'm a fan of it and we like it because we want Thursday football, we want Sunday football, we want Monday football. So as a fan, I think we're pulled of what we want. But me having a lot of relationships with a lot of players or ex-players, it's just not really good on them, their bodies, their future, their longevity in their career. And I don't think that, the NFL speaks out of one mouth for one thing and out of the other mouth for the other thing. So you change up special teams because you want to keep them healthier, but then you add more Thursday night games and even flex Thursday games. So I'm sure the players are a bit confused, to be honest with you.
I think it's a waste of time, this fair catch. Why even kick the ball off then? All they do is kick it off and go to a timeout anyway and a commercial. Don't waste my time. I mean, how are you going to ask your special teams, your gunners, to run down the field and, bust their ass to get down there, and then a guy puts his arm up last second on the 10-yard line?